What's up, CS students? It's Jake here with another daily devotional for you guys. As a lot of y'all may be aware, we have just started a new sermon series on Sunday mornings going over Psalm 23, where Bruce is leading us through verse by verse, one of the most famous Psalms in the whole Bible, right? And so last week we joined alongside them and we looked at the first 2.5 verses. And so today we're going to be looking at the next section of verses in Psalm 23. So I want to invite anybody who's watching this devotional right now to go ahead and grab your Bible, open it up to Psalm 23, because we are going to get started right now. Psalm 23, starting in the middle of verse 3, it says this: "He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." So the big picture image here that's going on, it's continued from the first section of verses, is that God is imaged as a shepherd who is watching over his people, just like a shepherd would watch over sheep, right? And so we have this big picture image in these verses that God is our protector and our comforter in all circumstances. And so I want to break this down a little bit though, because in the first set of verses that we looked at last week, it talks about how God is a shepherd and he leads us to beside still waters, and he makes us lie down in green pastures. And it's very like peaceful imagery. But in this section, it's different, right? Because it's talking about, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And so in the last set of verses, we have very peaceful imagery. But in this set of verses, we have very distressing and dark imagery. And, I think it's maybe a little bit odd or confusing sometimes because, if God's leading us through green pastures in these peaceful moments, and then he's leading us in valley of the shadow of death moments, is there a right one? And I think the key to this is in the second half of verse 3, where it says, "He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake." And so what we see is that God is leading us on paths of righteousness, that God is leading us on right paths. And whether that is green pastures, or that is the valley of the shadow of death, both of those are paths of righteousness. Both of those are the right path. The key is that God is leading us, that God is watching over us, that he's protecting us no matter what. And I think that can be so comforting, because we can know that no matter what circumstance we're in, whether we're in times in our lives that are like green pastures and it's totally peaceful, or we're in times in our lives where we are walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and it is just darkness all around us and we don't know where to go, we can be trusting that God is going to take care of us. God is protecting us. He is providing for us. He's watching over us no matter what. Now, that's not an excuse for us to go and do something really stupid and then just expect God to bail us out at the last minute despite our own stupidity, right? Like, that's not what this is saying. But what this is saying is that when we're following God, when we're being led by him, no matter what situations we find ourselves in, whether they're good or they're bad, whether they're green pastures or they're valleys, whether they're light or darkness, we know that God is our shepherd and he's leading us through that. And that gives us great peace and great confidence in him. Because here's the deal. David is not the main character of this psalm. We are not the main characters of this psalm. The main character of this psalm is Yahweh God, is the shepherd who's doing all of these actions to provide, to protect, to comfort. He's the one who this psalm is about. And so he's the one who gives us the great hope to go forward. He's the one that we should be putting our confidence in. So he's the one who we have all the confidence and all the hope and all of that stuff. But here's the deal, and I want to get a little personal for a second here, because When I read this psalm, I can't help but think of a very recent time in my life where I experienced a moment that very much felt like Valley of the Shadow of Death. So, just this past February, I got married to my wife, Katie. And we got married, we went on our honeymoon, and we went on a road trip all the way up to North Dakota, where we spent a week at this really this preserved old west town, and it had a ton of snow, and it was just really great and super peaceful and refreshing, and it really felt like one of those green pastures moments that the first section of the psalm talks about. But then on the first day of our drive home from our honeymoon, my car broke down in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota. It's a little tiny town called Hoven, South Dakota. You can look it up just to see how in the middle of nowhere we were. And we were stranded. I had no way of getting any help. But to make a long story short, we ended up having this mechanic who came on his day off to help us out, pushed our car into his workshop, and we found out that my car was a goner and that there was going to be no way for us to get that thing home. We ended up being stranded in this small town on our honeymoon for 3 days. 3 days in a town of like 100 people. We were hundreds of miles away from the nearest airport, hundreds of miles away from the nearest anything. And we did not know what to do. But in all of the moments where we were like, oh my gosh, what the heck are we doing? How are we going to get home? What's going on? In all of those moments, we knew that God was taking care of us. And we had hope that He's in control. We had peace that He was going to get us home. And we did everything that we could, and eventually we just had to just pray and just let God work it out. And sure enough, He did. There was a person in town who bought our car for twice as much as we asked because he just wanted to give us the money. And he provided for us a waitress at the town's only restaurant who just so happened to be going to the nearest Walmart, which was over 150 miles away. And there happened to be a bus station near that Walmart that could take us home. And yeah, that bus trip was tough. It was 26 hours with no sleep on a bus with a lot of weird people. But the Lord provided for us and got us home. And we have stories to tell our kids and our grandkids and a lot of great memories, even though it was a very tough situation. And so what I want to challenge you guys with is to have that mentality that no matter what situation you're dealing with, no matter how tough it is, to have faith and to trust that God is your shepherd and that He's going to take care of you no matter what. And so I want to hear from you guys. Is there a situation that you've been in that felt like a valley of the shadow of death moment? And if you've been in that, how have you seen God provide for you in those situations? Whatever it is, we want to hear from you guys. Let us know and comment below. We love you. God bless you. Have a great week.